What if you had spent your time of service within the military only working jobs in a combat arms capacity? What if you changed your job title when you left active duty and began to see things in a different light after having experienced another side of the mission that held human connections more important than dominance through extraordinary firepower? What if your purpose of helping others shifted into the nonprofit sector, where the mission changed to helping others navigate the tumultuous times in service when life shifts to finding your next career path successfully? Join me as I talk with Johnathan Severs as he shares his own path from starting out his military service from within the infantry to now working as the Director of Client Programs at Hire Heroes USA. This is Veteran Success Story. Welcome to another episode of Veteran Success Story. In this episode, I sat down with Johnathan Severs, who works with Hire Heroes USA. This is one of the first episodes to where I started talking to ground level people that are out there. They're doing the work supporting other veterans. And in this case, ones that are one of the most crucial periods of time. I know I'm way past this point, at this point myself, but there's a lot more out there that this service just isn't for just someone who's transitioning out of the military, but also people who are out there that one of the main focuses right now, or one of the major focuses right now that Hire Heroes USA has is homeless veterans. So we go into it in the episode, but really quick, this episode is really, it's going to be good for a lot of people, spreading this information and getting these services out there that Hire Heroes USA does. And that really encompasses career path. They do career coaching, resume building, mentorship, and mock interviews. That's their main focus on stuff. There's a few other programs within there, but really this is one of the first episodes where we dive into those services that life-changing and kind of can help a lot of people out. It gives a lifeline and provides a framework in something that a lot of veterans, including myself, struggle with during that transitionary period in leaving the military and entering that civilian workforce. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Follow and subscribe for more of this content and everything. If it helped you out personally, go tell someone else. There's a bunch of different episodes that are going to be out there, and really between the storytelling and the information and the inspirational content that's filtered or put in between these different episodes, as a whole, I'm hoping to build something that really is all-encompassing, something that can help everybody else out and give back and help enable these messages that are out there. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and without speaking any more on it, let's go right into it. Welcome to another Veteran Success Story. Today I'm talking with Johnathan Severs of Hire Heroes USA. John, nice to have you on the show, man.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to talk with you.
Same. So I know it's through a mutual connection to where it was just kind of weird on how all this worked out, on how, through Dale and everything, who's going to be coming up on an interview soon enough, which is pretty cool. But through hearing through him as well, and then seeing that everything that you guys have done, just really quick as a brief overview, and then I want to actually get into you, and we can talk more about Hire Heroes USA after we get a little bit of your background and your experience with them. But Hire Heroes USA, career coaching is kind of what you guys provide through your service.
Yeah, I would say at the core of our services, our primary hallmark of our programming is career coaching. And that means, working with military spouses and veterans, active duty service members alike, from the moment they decide I need to, find a career post-military, or I'm already been out of the military for however amount of time, I need something better, something more fluid for me. We work with them where they are to find more meaningful employment for them. Our overall goal is definitely employment and improving their employment situation. And we do it through numerous different ways. We do work with employers, which I think is where some of the placement aspect comes from, to connect them. Networking is definitely part of your research. And we also connect them with resources. So there's a ton of training partnerships that we have, or resource partnerships that we have to help them upskill and become better candidates at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, and then I know we were talking briefly before off camera to where, you've had the career coaching thing going, but one of the more recent things was a program that was dealing on the homeless veteran population and kind of on how it's a little bit different because a lot of your stuff runs in the virtual space. But I thought it was really cool that part of the program, not only is it in person, which is really necessary for someone like that anyway. You're building accountability, you're building, that hands-on thing. But man, one of the things that you had said, with the major problem being that a lot of the homeless veteran population just never even registered in with the VA.
So the homeless thing is, it's a new concept for us. We've obviously worked with clients who have been homeless in the past, naturally, as they register for our services. A couple of years ago, we launched our first homeless program intended solely to focus on that population. And we did that in the greater Colorado Springs area, which was seeing a plethora of homelessness. When we did that, we quickly learned that, employment may be the outcome and maybe what stabilizes your employment situation, your stability in life. Housing is definitely a piece of it. And trying to get them stabilized with housing, we learned quickly that, well, in order to get housing through other government programs, you need to be in the system. Whether that's having been to the Department of Veteran Affairs, having been in anything, whether it's HUD-VASH or any of the programs. So through coaching, we learn a lot with clients, especially when it's in person and you're sitting there, you're talking to them. We quickly realized that a lot of their challenges were associated with their service, which is why they were in the situation in which they're in. And naturally, for most people, especially myself being combat arms, you're it's kind of ingrained on you when you leave the military, like go apply for VA disability benefits.
Yeah, they literally tell you.
They tell you, they walk you
through. Sign up for
it.
everything. They have that old crusty guy come in and say, I don't care. You tell them your aches and pains.
Yeah, you go in the VA on your worst day, right? And give them your spill. And we were learning that these individuals, a lot of them, had not done that. And had they just done that, A, they would have been in the system, but B, they would have had some means of financial income that could have lightened that situation. So we took a different approach to our coaching philosophy there to include, yes, up front, we're going to talk about housing and getting a roof over your head, because you can't have a job and be an effective job seeker if you're not stabilized first, Yeah. I imagine it's hard to go from the streets to a job back to the streets. So we worked with housing, developed partnerships with other government agencies there. And then we focused on the job search, your skills, your resume, your LinkedIn for those who could get it, and access to how to improve those things themselves through whether the library or other government programming. And then we added this extra layer of coaching them on, well, here's how to apply for your VA disability benefits, here's how to apply for other programming that you're not eligible for. The results of that in Colorado it's been quite successful. In the last 2.5 years, really, we've gotten over 200 participants in that program. More than half of those homeless veterans are now fully employed. And of those fully employed, maybe a few have come back needing additional assistance. So they're stable, which is perk for us. That's really the ultimate win. And then just this past year, we decided to replicate that here in Raleigh, the Wake County capital area of North Carolina, which is where I'm housed out of. So we're only a couple of quarters into that program, and we're seeing the exact same thing on a different scale. And to me, it feels like it goes quick once you get a veteran into the system, and the veteran knows what's what, where housing is, where employment is, all these different things, and who's good at what. Because you'll quickly find that there are roles in some organizations that try to do everything, and that's impossible to do.
Yeah.
I think the difference maker for us in that transition specialist role, or that career coach that we're working with them, is we're not trying to do everything. We'll focus on the employment side, and we'll make sure you have a trusted resource and a vetted resource to do the rest. And then we encourage you along the way.
Yeah, no care. That's that complete side of, building in a purpose, but you have to have that foundation laid. And if you don't have that, I know it can just seem like just completely overwhelming. There's so many things to do at that point, and your support system from the military, that side is pretty easy. If you really look down on it, it's not like it's an easy job. But then when you look into, what happens and that completes, you're losing your support base, you're losing that stability. And so if you're going into the civilian world, a lot of your friend base a lot of times is either back home where they've gone. So, I mean, it's a tough point to be in. And I think actually really that transition into the civilian side is where we lose a lot of our guys, and that's really that critical point. You want to talk a little bit? I know that you're the perfect person to talk to because not only, you work there, but you at first went through the program yourself. You want to go into a little bit about your background. So I'd love to hear about it. You were talking before about you were infantry, but mechanized. I know it's not airborne, you filthy leg, but no, I'm sorry.
Well,
I can help myself.
Yeah. I always joke because I live here in Carolina. I'm right down the street from Fort Liberty, which is like the mecca of everything airborne. And when I went into the reserves after my active duty career, I was surrounded by them. Right, everyone on the installation was airborne, and I'm there like never even crossed my mind to jump out of a plane. But for me, my entire military story is I kind of just followed the path. I mean, I joined the military out of high school 5 or 6 months later. So I joined a little bit later than everyone else. When I graduated high school, I went and became a welder for 4 or 5 months. The job was great, paid well, especially where I'm from. I'm from a small town in Western Kentucky. Poverty is known. All my friends that I had joined the military right out of high school, so they were gone. And I went into welding because I just want to stay home and help provide for my family,
Yeah.
I definitely grew up poor and things like that. So when we got to the point where my friends were getting ready to graduate and come home, I think for me, it was like, I felt embarrassed. I was kind of shameful. Like, I don't want to be here when they come home and I'm still here. And I kind of know what I'm going to become. So I immediately went to a recruiting station and I was going to go speak with the Navy. And because my grandfather had served in the Navy, so that's the only thing I knew about the military really was. And just so have it, when I went to the recruiting station, it was one of those recruiting stations where every branch is represented. They all see you as you walk in. The Navy wasn't there, so I turned around. I went to leave, and the Army recruiter, I remember to this day, Staff Sergeant Lynn came out and asked me what I was doing. I kind of just gave him my sob story, like I don't want to be here with my friends come home, and we sit down and had a conversation about what he did. He had been a military police officer in the Army, and I was like, that sounds like something I want to do, That's not what I did. We sit down, next thing I know, I'm on a plane 6 days later going to Fort Benning, Fort Moore now, the infantry. And I had no idea what the infantry was until maybe about 2 months in when they give you that spill before you eat your blue cord. I was like, oh, I'm glad, looking back at it, I'm glad I did what I did, but in that moment, I know if I had an option to do something different, I probably would have chose.
Yeah, you had no clue. How in the heck did this recruiter you went from, MP and that talk? Like, how did did he show you videos or something? Or was you need to be one that's closing and killing.
I saw all the videos. I saw all the videos, everything. I guess the way I got excited about it, he's like, infantry, that's you. So I go there, and granted, I did not join the military out of patriotism or anything like that. I joined to escape a poverty. I didn't want to continue the cycle.
Yeah, there's multiple reasons to go, and that's especially one of them from a small rural town like that. Absolutely.
And the only goal I had was okay, I'm gonna go to the military. I'm just gonna keep my head down, do what I'm told to do, and I know I'm gonna get college benefits when I'm done.
Yeah,
that was my goal.
You just didn't know all the baggage that would come along with it.
I no clue. For me, I'm the 5th or 6th children, and I'm the first one in my entire family just to graduate high school. So I've already accomplished something. I just going to college to me meant a lot. So I go to Fort Benning, Fort Moore. I do that, and then my entire when you receive your orders where you're going for your first duty station, they all got the same orders to go somewhere else. They all went to Fort Lewis, GBLM, and I got orders to Fort Hood. And I was like, why am I the only one? So I get there, and the first thing I hear is about the 11 Bravo conflict, what mechanize this, mechanize that. And I have no idea. I see a Bradley for the first time, I think it's a tank. So, but it warmed up on me, especially when I got to that first deployment and whatnot. So I'm in it for 3 years, thinking that's going to be it. I get to my first deployment, things get kind of crazy. My first tour was in Baghdad, Iraq, with the 4th Infantry Division, and it was the Brotherhood that got me. I was like, it sucks, yes, but it sucks for everybody, and that kind of camaraderie is really what I think the best perk of being in the military is. So my friends and I, we all re-enlisted on the same day. So next thing I know, I moved from a 3-year contract to basically 9 years, get a nice little bonus, everything like that. And my whole plan had kind of changed. So college, you push it to the right, and then I stayed in. I deployed again the same unit with the same group of guys, which is not very common, especially.
No, it's not common at all. Usually it's every which way the Army sends you.
And I came back and did a year on recruiting, which I thought was eye-opening and quite eventful itself. And then I got selected to go be a cadre, go back to the Home of the Infantry at the time, which I think now is the Maneuver Center of Excellence, or for more, to teach hand grenades for a couple of years. And that was like every day was eventful because some kids can throw, some could not. Every day was like a risk assessment. Every day was something life changing because if you messed up, it was the end of the world, literally.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
So I did that, and then my last year, I got orders to Korea to do my last tour in Korea. So at this point, this was 2012. My son had just been born, and I'm leaving 2 or 3 weeks later, basically like a deployment cycle all over again. So when I left the military from Korea, which I think is probably the worst thing possible to separate from the active duty from an overseas location. So like the TAPS workshops and the Soldier for Life and all those different things, I didn't know what that was until I came back. Actually, wow. I never attended a TAPS workshop until I got into this line of work and kind of like,
whoa.
So I missed out on all the, the federal resume this and your VA disability this. I learned about VA disability in the reserves because everyone was talking about it. Like, what's your rating? I had no idea. Actually, it's one of the first conversations Dale and I had. It was like, you have a rating? I don't, but we should definitely get one. Let's look into it.
Everybody's talking about this cool rating thing.
So for me, like the moment I separated, I came home and the plan was, this is getting back to your question. My plan was what my plan originally had been. Let's go to college. But now I'm, late 20s. I have a son.
Then
college isn't going to put a roof on my head and pay the bills and everything like that. And, obviously help me raise this child. So I knew I had to get a job. I was to do college at night. But I knew when I went into the military, GI benefits were what I was there for. And that was my game plan. So when I left, I was very textbook, stereotype, infantry. I thought the only thing I could do was probably security, maybe law enforcement. So I put all my eggs in one basket. And on top of that, I was like, okay, I knew IT was paying well because I came back to Raleigh, which was a triangle, like Silicon Valley of the East Coast. So a
lot of people don't realize that.
Location. And that was that's the only thing I knew. And then when I was on active duty, I met a couple of connections, and just like when Dale and I met, those connections have reached out to me and told me about Hire Heroes USA. I'd never heard of them. And so I registered to become a client only because I thought I was doing my friend a favor. That was it. I had no intention of taking it serious or anything. And the next thing I know, I get a call the following week, and it's not from my friend who works at the organization. It was from a transition specialist out of Georgia who's asking me all these questions about, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? What makes your heart go pitter patter? Like all these different things. And that conversation and the conversation that followed is the first time I actually thought I put all my eggs in one basket, and I think I may have messed up. So here I was working a full-time job, making a little over minimum wage out of high school doing security. It was fun, but it was nowhere near the ends to the means,
Yeah.
And I was working my way through school, getting a degree that I'm not going to use, but here I am because I know I need something, right? but then I kept getting the calls from my transition specialist, and she would just coach me on like different philosophies and this and that, and where to apply myself and talk about networking, how to create my LinkedIn profile, because I hadn't had one. It was all those conversations about, which I learned now is like really the philosophy of career coaching. Making you think, where do you want to work? What industry? How do you want to approach it? How do you want to upskill? All those different things. Those conversations, I ended up looking forward to them. I knew they were coming every 3 to 4 weeks. If not, I'd always reach out, and that hasn't changed with our process today. But yeah, I would try to accomplish certain things in between our conversations, just so when she called, I could, report, hey, I'm doing better, or this has changed, or whatever. And that I didn't know at the time. I was really just developing a rapport. So when Hire Heroes just happened to expand into Raleigh, they put an office in Raleigh outside of Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, because at the time there was a lot of in-person workshops and things like that, very similar to what TAPS was doing.
Yeah,
to resume writing, things like that. I got a call from my transition specialist, and she was basically like, hey, I know you're working in security. I know your goal is law enforcement. Because at the time I was, I was penny officer in 3 or 4 different police departments, which I know, it's stable employment. I don't think I would have loved it today. But she's like, I think you'd be great in this role. And she sent me the job description, and I read it, and it was essentially coaching. It was writing, and maybe some other things from presentations and things like that. And I thought, well, I've been a recruiter. I could always write. I could write going back to high school and things like that.
Yeah.
And coaching, like, well, I made E7. I got to be able to coach somebody. I was pretty young when I did that. So we had another conversation, and we went back to my resume and just tailored it. And it's really the first time I ever tailored my resume about, this is what you're asking me to do. Here's how I could do it.
Yeah.
And as long as you train me on how to do X, Y, Z in the middle, I think I can do what you want. So we did that. I applied, I got an interview, and the rest is kind of history. I got my foot out the door, and I just worked my way up learning everything, no different than you do in the military. Like, haven't been infantry. I didn't know what infantry was for 2 months, but you know what? I was really, really good at it for 9 years before I switched in the reserves. So that's my story. I think Hire Heroes, the way they impacted me was opening my eyes. If you asked me when I left active duty in November 2012, what I'd be doing 10 years from now, I would say, well, I wouldn't say working in a veteran service organization, nonprofit space. I knew nothing about it, or running programs nationwide on homelessness and other state efforts and things like that. I knew nothing about it. I probably would have told you that something related to what I did in the military. So something related to infantry, security, maybe going back to teaching, master gun approaches like that. So that to me is the value of career coaching. And just summarize Hire Heroes as a whole, that is what we bring to the table, I think, with every client we touch. I'm just fortunate to be one of them.
And that approach too is just, it's much more, they're investing into the person that they're servicing. It's they're taking that person who's seeking, like you said, you were doing it as a favor to a friend. Yeah, I'll sign up for it. Let's see what it's got. But really, you had no clear direction. You didn't know up until that point. If you're asking advice to others around you that are also seeking, it's sort of either blind leading the blind in some cases, and you just don't know what's available to you out there. I mean, and definitely, that's a shame on everything from Korea, because I know when I got out, it wasn't perfect. The TAP system, the TAP program, transition assistance program, was mediocre at best. You have an E6 who's also separating, that they chose to teach a resume class, and this guy has such basic knowledge in a quick thing of, let's put together this resume. All right, that looks great, and set up a LinkedIn, which I used to my own advantage later on. I just realized, hey, everybody leaving the military has a LinkedIn, so
yeah,
that networking end paid off in spades later on. But the fact that they didn't really, I was helping others around me, write a resume. It wasn't really like a true resume class. There really wasn't much more built into it, and it's one of the disconnects that I see to where that's where we lose a lot of guys. A lot of guys, again, they're getting better at it, about the process of putting people through the VA rating side of things. It's kind of, at least it was on Bragg at the time, it was a required thing. Like, you had to go through in registering so that they started the examinations process, or they would not stamp you off on there at the Soldier Support Center, which is where everyone's going through to out process. So, I mean, it's one thing, but to have you guys there as a career coach, and to ask those questions, and to lead someone towards something that gives them purpose, that's matter of fact, like with what you're doing now, and everything that I've actually heard from Dale on that end, which was kind of cool. He's just like, the second I mentioned your name, I was like, oh, I'm going to be talking with John coming up here soon. And he just he brightened up, and it was just this, oh man, freaking, he's a great dude and everything else. And it just sounded like that purpose is built in there. You enjoy helping other people out there. Like, where does that end fulfilling for you? Like, what drew you to that? And like, basically, where's your passion lying there?
Well, a couple of things. I think TAPS is a great program. I just think it could be better. I mean, yeah. TAPS itself it's just a one-stop shop, and you can't get all the answers right then and there. And really, the issue is there's no continuation of care afterwards. And career coaching is, if I'm sitting at a TAPS workshop and I tell you I want to do X, Y, Z, you'll tell me to apply here, and that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
We'll write one resume together, and that resume is supposed to follow me everywhere I go. I love the fact that it exists, and it opens that conversation and makes people think. I would love it even more. Like, the last step was like, okay, pushing you to at Hire Heroes USA or something like that, for that continuation of care and things like that, because you already have a foundation.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like having that E6 come in and talk about resumes. I think that's where a lot of organizations go wrong. Two fronts is, you don't need to be military to work with the military and be effective at it.
Yep.
And because some of the people I work with have never served, aren't even military spouses, but they're educators, they're employment specialists and things like that. They understand the market better than I do.
Yeah.
And when you talk about writing a resume for a veteran, people always mention like, well, you got to translate it, get the jargon out, things like that. Well, who's better to write a resume for you than someone who doesn't understand the jargon? So therefore, the resume needs to make sense to them,
Yep.
And the other side of the house is like, I would never take advice from somebody who's never transitioned themselves, which I saw that a lot when I was getting out, the E7, E8s, and my commander, everything like that, telling me, well, you'll be all right, just do this. Like, but you've never done it, so how do we know? But because I hear it all the time, especially we used to do in-person workshops a lot, their commander would force them to be there, and I would always go back to, well, this is a 2-day workshop or a 3-day workshop. More care is needed. Your commander probably should come and listen to the brief as well. And that's really where we can improve the entire thing. It's just getting to that leadership. I mean, and granted, military leaders are really focused on their numbers for deployment and things like that, as they should be. But we do invest a lot of time in getting people right for the military. We should invest a little more time in getting them right to leave it. My passion, I mean, I like helping people. I think everyone naturally likes helping people. But for me, I'm very much I'm a data person. And I'm not a know-it-all. I'll tell you when I don't know something, or if I'm just giving my opinion. It's just a blessing and really cool to see, like, when something, when Dale and I working together, he wanted to work in the pet industry. I've never worked with anyone in the pet industry my entire life. Mm-hmm. So he has questions and I'm trying to help him get the answers to it. And at the time I'm kind of like learning about the industry myself, and sales and things like that, things he does now. And it's cool that there's a roadmap you can kind of follow with where, what, and how, and things like that. And it kind of applies to the industry. But when you can take something for the first time and put it there, and it's not copy and paste, it's just a personalized approach to career coaching, and it pay off, that's great. And with Dale, like, and others that have that type of relationship with so many people who know me by name, and when I see them, it's always even if they moved on in different roles since I've been able to help them, they're just an advocate of ours because in the same way I'm an advocate of my transition specialist. We made a connection. We were able to kind of see it through and have positive outcomes. And to me, that's what I enjoy the most. I'm a data person. I'm kind of just chasing hires. If I work with you, I want to see you find employment. I don't want you to fall off the face of the earth and I lose contact with you, because to me that's failure. But if you can find employment, if it's not the dream job, that's fine. But if it's a step in the right direction, that's a win. And let's keep working together. As Dale and I have, we work together now through 3 or 4 jobs until you get to that where that's the job in which you consider a dream job, and it's a job in which you want to be known for at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people feel that way. A lot of our staff feel that way too. Because granted, in the nonprofit space, you're not going to get rich working in nonprofits, but you can fill your cup quite a bit with helping people. And that's kind of what I do. I fill my cup every day.
And I could see too where that falls into, that's just natural for someone, you know, in a position to where they actually cared for their guys in the military. Because I mean, at least where I came from anyway, I've seen Toxic Command too. But that was one of the eye openers to where my original unit, everybody was, you know, it was always caring for your guys. You never went anywhere alone. And it was kind of weird at first, like, especially I was a little bit older when I first got in. So I was like, oh, like I got to bring the young bucks around and stuff. All right. You know, traveling as an LGOP, as a team, you know, but, there's something to that. There's something to having somebody have your back and everything. And then when you have this support system built in and you have people that you have that instant rapport with, and then you leave the military and you don't get a lot of that on the civilian side until you're either working with somebody and whatnot. So, I mean, that's really cool that you're getting this passion and this purpose of helping other people, but you're also establishing this long-term relationship with them as well. Or at least trying to, you know, it sounds like that's the type of guy you are. Is they're like, hey, once we've kind of gone through coaching, once I've got you where I need to be, like, don't be afraid to reach out, like, and keep in touch with me. So not only I see the value also in the fact that by establishing those connections, you know, you now have someone to reach out, you know, like you said, Dale, pet industry. I'd never worked with anybody in the pet industry now, but it sounds to me after talking to him as well, that you could be like, hey, Dale, you know, call him up. I've got someone here who wants to be involved here in the pet industry. Where should he be looking? You know, or who should I call about this? You know, and that right there, establishing those connections and those relationships, that's huge. And doing it in a way that's fulfilling not only to you, but you're also helping this other person. You're basically leveling them up as well. So it's just cool, man. It's just full cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think word of mouth marketing itself it is a direct result of that, right? And being in our space and being a nonprofit, we don't spend a lot of money on marketing. A lot of our money goes to our direct services themselves. So if you're successful in your role of coaching someone and they do find employment, they themselves are the force multiplier, right? And even in the nonprofit space, I think if I can just throw a plug in there for people to work in this space, it's very much great for military-minded people. I'll relate it like this. I remember being in the military, being mechanized infantry, you know, the great infantry that is. And I remember sweeping the motor pool. Every Friday, sweep the motor pool. And I always thought we were sweeping to get the dust out just for beautification and things like that. But then I realized it's not for that. And I had one of my senior NCOs at the time sit me down and tell me that, well, we sweep the motor pool, that way it's not dusty. That way if there's a leak, we see it and things like that. I'm like, that makes sense, you know? It's those little details like that, which are a pain at the time. There's so many of them, and you always think, well, that's not my job. But in the grand scheme of things, it's definitely related to what is your job. It's just a small piece of it. It doesn't make its way to the job description, but when you add them all together, it makes doing something that is your job a lot easier. And that to me is like the nonprofit space. You know, you wear so many hats, but you don't have to be an expert at everything. You should be able to connect all the dots. And the military folks I've worked with, but even myself as an example, I think that's just perfect transition, you know?
I know that's another thing we were talking about before too, is that, there are post 9/11, there's a lot of nonprofits out there now. I mean, I think the number is over 40,000 that are dedicated towards helping veterans, but there's a lot of overlap and a lot of, it almost varies state to state, and then some of these nationwide ones, and they're all trying to, they've all got their programs, and there's so much overlap in it. It's almost like, and not to dog on it too much, but the fact of there needs to be someone who can either coordinate it, or trim it down. Honestly, I know some of them go to the wayside that, we're really doing something good there. I've noticed a lot of the local end charities and stuff do some great work out there locally, but then, there's just, it's not perfect. And that's wherever you go. But with you guys specializing in that particular thing, that's, from now on, I know that I'm going to be pointing people towards Hire Heroes USA. That's a mission that it's necessary out there. But it also sounds like it's something that you guys have your hearts in. You're invested in it more than just, that run through, or, hey, we got another fundraiser going. You're invested in the people that you're servicing.
Well, it's interesting, all the overlap that's in the space, 40,000 plus, and who knows, maybe there's more, maybe there's less with the economy, the way it kind of has been the last couple of years. But I know for a fact that there's overlap in the coaching environment. But then again, I wouldn't say we have a direct competitor with Hire Heroes. And the reason I wouldn't say that is because I know our true focus is employment and employment only. Yeah. Others may be good at it, and we don't discourage you from using them. I mean, you should get a second opinion, just like you on your resume, just as you would with your medical advice, But the local resources, as you mentioned, I think that's the bread and butter. One of the things we do really, really well is we in the last handful of years really established our local resources and referral partnerships. Yeah. I said, you may be a veteran working with me that lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I can help you with resume. I can help you with coaching. I can help you with all these different things. But the best thing I can do for you is connect you with that local resource, because that local resource is probably who's going to know, Dale at the pet industry, or, whoever at this organization, and be able to facilitate that handoff, Yeah. As we mentioned earlier with the homeless population, that's where the win has been, which is establishing those local relationships. It's just hard to do on a nationwide scale. But I know it's the same thing we said with training partnerships. If we identify that you have this barrier to employment, which is your education or your certification or your skills themselves, we can then direct you to, not just direct you, but present a warm handoff to a partnership that we've vetted, that we think will do right by you, and isn't just going to charge you a ton, because we charge nothing to our clients at all to work with us for as many times as they need to, and we kind of want to keep that same experience ready for them through everybody. And if they are going to charge you, make sure that charge is related to your benefits. You can use your GI benefits or whatever to kind of cover it. That way, you're not going deeper into the hole. Because what's worse for a job seeker looking for a job, other than have to pay for things, have to get a job? Insert the college issue right now with paying student loans and whatnot. It just keeps that going, But yeah, I think the local resources are definitely part of our coaching philosophy. And I think for most of our clients, it kind of ends that way some way or another. Or if it's not with an organization or with an employer or whatever, it's with another veteran, very much like other organizations do, where they create communities, because those communities and networking is really, really where you make your money. Because you can have a bad resume, and you can be the lesser qualified candidate, but if you know the right people, you get an interview, you get an opportunity. Yep. And every interview, every time you meet someone, you're interviewing, and every interview is always an opportunity,
Always, for sure. That's so. I mean, do you have a good example or a story that you can run me through of someone that was just facing absolute hell out of there and came through your door, and you brought them through, you coached them through, or heard about on how they went from, basically zero to hero. A success story for Hire Heroes USA.
Oh, there's been so many. I won't use Dell. We've talked enough about Dell, but I
Yeah,
will tell
yeah.
you, the first person I ever worked with is the one I remember the most. And I remember the most because it's the one resume which I looked at 1,000 times for 100 hours before I was confident enough to send them the resume. And this was a veteran that was leaving Fort Campbell. He was originally from Arkansas, and he wanted to go back home to do telecommunications. That's what it was. So this first resume I wrote, Hire Heroes, I'm writing a resume about telecommunications. I'm trying to learn what that was, put it on paper, and have these conversations with them. And obviously make a good example of myself out in my new work environment. I want people to see my quality, my work seems to be high, and boy, it would be nice if I got an early win. So the client and I spoke for maybe 3 months in total, which is an extremely fast process that I learned now. So by the time I get the resume to the point where I could share it with him, and granted, I wrote the resume from scratch because he had nothing. But this is a veteran who spent 9 years on active duty in the Army. So we had that connection. We had the rapport. We worked routinely. But he had children. He had 3 or 4 children. His wife wasn't working. And he's about to relocate on top of all that. And the first thing we talked about was, why Arkansas? Why? But like most veterans, is you either decide to stay where you are, or for your last duty station, you decide to go someplace where, I don't know, it's always been your calling, or you go back home. Most people tend to go back home, especially the younger enlisted side. And every job I try to pull up on LinkedIn or on Indeed or Monster, things like that, I could not find a role in which to compare his resume to, the way I was giving him a better product. So we talked and talked and talked, and to the point where it's like, this doesn't exist where you want to go, and that's going to be a problem. And on top of that, your children are now old enough. Your wife wants to get back into the workforce. What she wants to do does not exist where you want to go. So he was still at Campbell on terminal leave, and I remember having a conversation with him where we hit we finally made progress. And it was, yeah, we're not going to go to Arkansas. And no shame on Arkansas, go Razorbacks, it just wasn't right for him. And that philosophy of going back home, and maybe being married family will help with childcare, but it's not really something you need because your children are older and things like that. So all the dots were not aligning. We end up looking at where the big markets were for that role and what he wants to do and where his connections were. And we ended up segueing from Arkansas to Georgia, to the Atlanta area, which I thought was a big win because they're very similar. It's southern states and things like that. It's a closer drive from Tennessee down to Atlanta. So we found a couple of roles. I remember walking him through, these are 3 job titles. I think you check a lot of boxes. So he had the education. He had the military education for sure that we could translate. And it didn't really require civilian education. It just more so required certifications, which were easy programs we could get him into. And oh, by the way, some of the organizations that were hiring offer this training up front. So we ended up getting him a role, and as a wireman doing something. I can't remember the company exactly, but when he applied for it, he got a call back the same day. So we had an hour-long conversation talking about this resume, how we're going to rewrite it, doing the rewrite together on a Google Doc, and then him applying as we're ending our conversation. And it had to be a couple hours later. I was getting ready to go home for the day. I remember him calling me back. It's like, I got an interview Friday. So this is probably a Tuesday, Wednesday. Nice. So I'm like, cool. Well, that went really, really fast. And I'm thinking in my head, what do I do next? So I know if he got an interview, the interview conversations, we need to prep him for that. And luckily, Hire Heroes has volunteers that kind of step in and do that. So I was able to connect him with a volunteer from that same industry to kind of walk him through a mock interview from maybe what he would see. Ironically, it was a volunteer from that same company, just at a different location.
Oh, that's wild.
So he had the mock interview on a Thursday, the interview on Friday. I got a call the following Monday that he had got a job offer. And in my mind, so my first question was great, does salary make sense? Because you're a family man, it has to make sense.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's more than I was expecting. I'm like, well, that's definitely a win. So you're going to accept it? He's like, I'm going to accept it. I'm like, well, hold up. Because every offer could be negotiated. So let's take a look at the offer, let's see what it was. And we were able to, because he was medically separated from the military. He didn't need like healthcare and things like that. So we were able to like negotiate that to where his salary got a little bit higher because he didn't need that added benefit.
Well, see, and just right there, I don't want to let this one skip by because so many people don't realize that too, is that when you get that offer back as a veteran or as somebody in the military, if you have a rating, if you have that injury side of things, you're absolutely right. You can go to your employer and be like, hey, you don't have to pay for healthcare for me. And you work that into the deal to where they're like, oh wow, okay, this guy he's not costing this, he's not costing that on us, and you can very easily come to the table with a new offer. I didn't mean to jump in there, but that is, always keep that in mind.
And for a company to cover your insurance or a piece of it, there's additional overhead on top of that as well. So them giving you 3, 4, 5K more is them winning.
Yeah.
But being able to present that in a written form and in a conversation, we tackled that. So my first client I ever worked with was probably I always say it's my best success story because we did everything. We did a mock interview. We did the resume multiple times. We did a salary negotiation. He was the first LinkedIn profile I ever built beyond my own, because he had LinkedIn at the time. So this is back in 2014. It was big. It was the biggest thing out there. It still is today. It's where I would push anybody who's looking for a job. Go on LinkedIn, create your network, your brand, and just go at it. But for him, he had no social footprint, and LinkedIn gives you a way to, illustrate yourself to an employer where your resume may not, because your resume is going to be a page, 2 pages. This is focused solely on a certain job if you tailor it correctly. But LinkedIn, you can go back as far as you want. You can add all your certifications. You can show your brand by having conversations on other people's posts and things like that. You can post yourself to show that you're active in any space. But it's not
Facebook. People need to also realize it is a career-based. Keep it towards that, because some guys, I see some of the posts out there like these days anyway, and it's like, why would you post that on LinkedIn? That makes no sense.
You know what? And it's very, very generational too. I don't know. I wish you could flag them on LinkedIn and say this is not a LinkedIn. This is a Facebook post.
Right. Yeah. And are they still doing, and I don't mean to go off track and stuff too, but it's not exactly. But is LinkedIn still doing, do you know about if they're still doing like that free year of premium for people separating the military? Okay. So that's another thing for people to be aware of. Like, you leaving the military, you have free access to this tool that is one of the most powerful tools out there. You can upload a resume to it. You can build a network from it, which is very easy to do. But a lot of people don't realize that they don't have it open, or they have it open to them for like a year of premium, which LinkedIn is not a cheap platform to be on. It's not, like, especially if you're advertising on it. Oh my God.
You know what? To put it in simple terms, if you can create a Facebook, you can create a resume because of LinkedIn. LinkedIn, with the way that it is now, especially with premium, like you can get for free for a year, and I think even continuations of it after your things expire, if you're still seeking as a military community member. Spouses get it as well. And but you can fill out a Facebook profile, you can fill out a LinkedIn profile, and with the AI integration aspect of it as well, the hardest thing about writing a resume is, how do I say what I did? Well, AI will help you do that. And then LinkedIn can, once you finish filling all the way out, putting your dates together, and going through all the AI process of incorporating what you've done into skills or to accomplishments, you can then print that out as a resume. I
actually need to go back for my own and do that.
I mean, it gives you a good foundation. It's not the perfect resume, I would say, to take for interviews, because it's quite lengthy. It has all your skills, kind of like in line by line order. But if you were to take that and take it to a transition specialist at Hire Heroes, they would convert that to a legitimate 2-page corporate standard on whatever you're looking to do.
Nice.
So I mean, there's really no excuse not to have something, because LinkedIn's there and it's free to create even without the premium. Even without the AI integration, you can go and use ChatGPT or Claude or other AI tools to help with the language aspect of it. And I wish the AI piece was a thing when I started career coaching, because it'd be a great tool to expedite the whole entire service delivery aspect of it,
Yep. No, absolutely huge. There's a ton of things to where it's like you can use it to brainstorm off of it, or like, you toss a few ideas off of it, and before you know it, you have a complete. That's one of the things I use for a few of the podcast frameworks and stuff too. Like, hey, create me a 2-hour framework for, this person who deals within here, and within 15 seconds, you have something that could have taken you a few hours. It's just you can use it to your advantage.
And it's funny because for a long time, I was the trainer for all of our new transition specialists.
Yeah.
And I would always tell them, because a lot of them were very much like myself. I had no real experience coaching, but could be taught how to coach. Because if you speak to people, you can have conversations about career searching. If you follow things through, if you're a checklist person, you're great for this role. And I would tell them, like, AI now, it makes it a lot easier because if you write a resume from scratch, that must be because you're the first person, the only person ever to have done it. With us, we've written, I don't know, at this point, maybe 150,000 plus resumes in our 20 years. This is our 20th year as an organization. So 150,000 plus resumes, maybe, honestly, probably a lot more than that. So therefore, if you were an infantry E7 like myself, it's very easy to find another infantry E7 that may have similar experience and kind of use it as a foundation.
Yeah.
And apply AI to it, apply conversation, because AI and ChatGPT and things like that is, if you and I have a conversation and I'm asking the right questions and I input that into ChatGPT, it's going to give me a very good product to work with. Maybe not perfect, but easy to tailor, and it'll happen really, really quick. And also, like ChatGPT and things like that, those AI tools will often give you something that you weren't even thinking about. Like, I know when I work with a client, I'm typically asking the same 6 or 7 questions up front, and then I kind of go from there. But AI tools will, if you use the right phrasing, will often give you more than you need, which is good.
Yeah. It's definitely the information age and stuff, and with integrating AI into supplementing your own human end of things. Like we were just saying, it's a time saver. It looks into things that you didn't think of, and then you get that generalized feedback from it, and then you go from there and tailor it. And it's just it's a tool. And it's a tool to where it's just becoming more and more and more relevant, to where these days, if you don't know AI, or at least aware of, man, you are just severely behind then.
It's only a matter of time. I think if we look 10 years ahead, it'll be very much like when computers became a thing. And then next thing you know, there's a huge IT boom. And now we have this IT boom. There's a huge cybersecurity boom. And now AI is really the thing right now. And 10 years from now, with changes in the space with Stargate and other things launching soon, it's going to be its own industry, I'm sure, where there's more roles now associated with it.
That's actually something that I should probably, and we'll talk afterwards about it, but there was somebody that I had on that he created an AI platform in order to help guys with their disability ratings and stuff. And literally all you do is take the Army's medical records and stuff, and if you have any current disability ratings and stuff, and it'll go through, and you can even put your civilian records in it, and it'll go back and it'll populate an entire, like, hey, this is justified with clinical studies and everything. So like the doctors, like, at it where they might not have signed off on it before, they look at it and they're like, oh man, like this information is just all, like, you have clinical studies that are justifying it, or showing why it's necessary, there's going to be a decline, and why there needs to be an increase in rating. It's phenomenal what he put together.
And I love to meet him too. Having talked about the homeless population, their issues, if you guys expedite that for them.
Oh, no, for sure. Well, it's a Vet Mentor AI, and I'll get you in touch with him. The guy's name is Paul Holinsky, and literally all he does is charge the, like, there's a bunch of them out there that are charging a percentage of, and he's like, no, he's like, I literally, it costs us because of the processing fees and stuff. He's like, so I just do it to cover that. It's like $100, and that's, anybody can come up with that. Like, and it's literally $100, and it gives you it for life. Like, that's the thing, is like, so when you come back, and once it's generated something later on down the road, if there's more problems or there's some exacerbated issues within their civilian records, they can go back to that same program, just log in, and enter that information in, and it'll update to a whole new, be like, all right, this is where you need to file. This is what you need to file. And here's the paperwork you need to file. And it just generates everything for you. It's insane.
Yeah, I love that philosophy because like using that homeless population we talked about, like they've been out for so long.
Yeah.
To where you get, the VA claims it's definitely a time thing. The longer you wait or the longer you go back and forth, the harder it is kind of get across that finish line.
Yeah.
But you get a rating at minimum, what was it, 30-50% to get where you're covered individually for healthcare?
Yeah.
And then
it's really not much.
Threshold of 100%, like that's definitely a game changer. It's a game changer if you're, I wouldn't say entitled to it, but if you earned it and deserving of it, you should get that. So having an AI tool that kind of expedites that, that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen both sides, and I'm sure, like, you said your experience in the reserves. That was actually one of the things that ticked me off once I got to a reserve unit, is those conversations to where people were talking, man, how do I get that hundo percent? Or all I want to do is get the hundo percent. Maybe I can, get injured on drill this weekend. And I'm like, dude, what in the hell is wrong with you, man? Like, I'm going to make sure that if something does happen, I'm going to bring it to the commander and be like, hey, yeah, this guy had said this beforehand. Well, you might want to look into it. It's just seeking out that disability rating. I've seen that end too, or heard the conversations in the VA. Actually, when I was going to the VRE program, I had some kid kind of pull me aside, and he was like, hey, like, let me tell you what to say to him. And I just looked at him and I was like, just get away from me, man. Like, I have never lied about anything during any of these programs. And, if you're doing that, if you continue to be next to me, I'm literally going to walk in there. It's not my place right now, and it should bother the hell out of you. But if you continue to try to push something on me like this, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to be like, hey, this guy right here needs to be out.
It's interesting with the VA and the reserves. For me, when I left active duty, maybe 6 months later, like I was already in the reserves for a couple months, I learned about it. So I did my claim. And my claim then was really just associated with my medical documentations from service.
Yeah.
I had left active duty because I sustained an injury on my second tour, and it was just hampering me. And so in the reserves, I kind of just, what's 1 week in a month, I kind of just get through the weekend, home 9 yards, do my thing. It got to the point where, I think President Trump had at this point had passed the memorandum of you're non-deployable, you have to go. And I just had back surgery, which is the injury which I had. So I let it linger for so long that I just had this surgery. And I just ironically, I come back and I had taken the PT test and passed everything. I was on the mend, but I had been given that profile where I was undeployable. The unicorn, the P3, which is like the first time I ever seen it. It was given. So I had heard about it, especially in the reserve, but then I got it. And so the very next thing is I'm being med boarded out of the reserves. Ironically, my contract was set to expire anyway. I'd only gone to the reserves for healthcare, kind of going back to when we talking about job seeking.
Same, very similar situation on my end.
So I'm now being med boarded, and it's interesting because my original VA claim was they included my back and things like that, but now I'm being med boarded for it, and the rating, I didn't get a rating for my back, which is why I moved following the claim. But the med board helped to give me that rating for my back, which to me is like there's always an argument if you feel like you're unjust or whatever. In that process, because you have two branches of a government not talking to each other, healthcare is not talking to the pay, the claims aspect of it, and they only know what they're looking at on paper. So this AI tool you speak about, if that does everything you need, and by attaching all those studies and things like that, that is an amazing tool that every veteran should be aware of, especially if you're a job seeker before you get out. And I know the military's got better with it, especially those who are med board. Because I know, like, when I left active duty, that was still the wave of the wounded, ill, and injured, the WTBs and things like that on military installations, which I think aren't as prominent as they were before. So you don't see a lot of those come. At least I don't see a lot come through our services from that aspect. But everything ties together. If it's a benefit relation or if it's something to do with your sort of living, it's a job seeking requirement. Something you have to fill in order to find happiness in that role.
Well, that's why the podcast stuff started, is it's trying to spread that information for other people. Like, hey, let's make a long format of something that's lasting where they can go back and listen to and be like, hey, these are the resources that you have out there. These are the people that are doing good out there. I try to be very careful about who I put on that pedestal and stuff because of some of the issues we were talking about before. But spread of information, we live in the information age, and there's no reason why there shouldn't be, a podcast out there or a platform out there that, kind of has that coordination thing or has like, hey, this is where you need to go see, instead of having your, and this is always a good thing too, as having a buddy who knows stuff in the system. I had one contact me not that long ago to where he was having some issues, and I got him linked in with Hunter 7, because there was a possible cancer end. And then once they had actually looked through everything, they found out that he actually had blood work with this stuff in there that showed he had this particular cancer for over a year, before it even popped any flag of the VA at all. It was just, I couldn't, and some of that crosstalk issue that you were talking about there was just no crosstalk to where it got lost in the sauce. And he never found out about it, and I've had something similar to where something got put at the bottom of a shelf, and then I called back 3 or 4 months later and they're like, oh crap, we just found it. She was let go and it just ended up in the bottom of this shelf, the paperwork. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? But this guy, having an actual life-threatening situation for over a year, and nobody even knew about it. And he's just going through the downward spiral, wondering what's going on. That right there is what I'm trying to combat through this.
Well, what's interesting with that as well is it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about I would never take advice on transitioning from the military from someone who's never done it.
Yeah.
But like with the VA aspect of it, there's so much back and forth with the claim process, and all those different perspectives matter.
They do.
The stronger your network is, and you've had buddies who've gone through it and increase their rating because of X, Y, Z, or they had this, they filed this claim for this, and you didn't know it existed, but yet it applies to you as well, yeah. Or even just that motivation, just having a conversation and you just thinking about what you may be sitting on or whatever that you should put out there. Yeah. I think that's a good example of just networking in general and keeping those relationships. Because I mean, if you get 100%, the payoff is obviously huge, right? That's life changing. And even
it allows you to have that base to where you can work off of without having, there's that stable base there, that foundation, and then you go from there.
Well, it also allows you to have more, I guess, choice in your research. If you have, obviously that means income coming in, no matter what the rating is, that may be what influences your decision to take a job that you're going to just not like, or a job that's kind of a dead end. And maybe it prolongs you to, you have more time to upskill or get a degree or certification, whatever the case may be, because you have that buffer. And to me, I think for veterans, that buffer is essential, right? Mm-hmm. Especially as you leave the military, there's obviously that huge process of finding your next step. But typically it's 12 to 16, maybe longer, even for military spouses, as they transition from one post to another to find meaningful employment and be able to sustain it. So I think that's just a good example of just relationships and keeping them, which that itself is a skill, probably the most desired skill possible. It makes you a good employee, makes you a good leader, makes you good everything.
Right. Yeah. I think it was Patrick Murphy was on, and he had said something that kind of clicked with me about your network is your net worth. Yes. And I mean, it really is when you start looking at it, and you ask anybody out there who's successful, I mean, to the millionaire point, and be like, would you rather another $1 million or, 100,000 people? And every time, 100,000 people. Absolutely. Yes, I'll take that. 100,000 willing people or people within the network. Yes. That's worth way more than $1 million. Well, 10,000 people.
That same concept can be applied to, like, when you're looking at to see whether or not someone's successful, like, show me their 3 or 4 closest friends. if they're successful people tend to gravitate towards each other, which it makes sense why you would go with 100,000 people, because money is one thing. Money is going to grow based off your network and things like that, because of your influence. And like, I see it all the time when I work with them, and especially early on, and their LinkedIn, it's like they've had it for years and they have like 10 connections. You're not on LinkedIn. Just because you have a profile, if you only have 10 connections and it's only people you know, you're not doing anything for yourself. Like mom and dad and, Will and Dell is not going to help you because that's all you know. Like LinkedIn is a great way and a free way and most efficient way to expand your network with people you don't know, because you should be connecting with people who have the same background as you, who work in the space in which you want to work in, who are in roles that may be able to get you to where you want to be. And you can see all that on LinkedIn, especially with your year-long membership and things like that. So if you're bad at networking, it's because you're bad at trying. It's easy as that,
Yeah. No, very true. So, I mean, John, you got any advice to leave the show with someone who's either looking for a job, in the process of leaving the military? I know a few of them that are they're a few months out actually from leaving. So hopefully they've already started that search and started that path and stuff. But do you have any words of advice from someone who works in there and sees this on a day-to-day?
I would say if your end game is it's more meaningful employment, better employment, that first and foremost, register with Hire Heroes USA. It's free. We're going to assign you a person, a transition specialist, who's going to work with you through the end, through the good, the bad, the ups and downs, the wins and losses. But that person is going to be a confidant that you can discuss anything with. And also we're connected with some amazing resources. But grow your network. Mentorship matters. Your transition specialist very well could be that mentor. But you should have several, not just one.
Yeah.
Because advice, there's so much different advice, and a lot of it, I would argue, is probably good advice. You should probably take doses of everything you get. But for a job seeker specifically, I would say don't overthink the resume. There's 1,000 ways to do it. And yes, Hire Heroes we have a format, different formats that we use, so they can kind of look the same. They do read differently. But your resume, don't overthink it, because the resume is just a one-time product that's going to change. Especially if you change industries, you change fields, different role levels, it's going to change. It's going to need to look different. Don't think you don't need to practice interviewing, because what's worse than getting an interview opportunity and then messing that up? You won't get it again, at least not with that same person. And I know for myself, I interviewed maybe hundreds of people in this role. I remember names. I remember them quite well. And I remember the impression that they've left on me. And I'm harder than others, whether I give them a second chance at that phase, So don't overthink the resume. Get a mentor, establish your network, grow your network. And remember, I guess you're always interviewing. Every interaction is an interview. It's not just casual conversation in an elevator. It's an impression that's going to linger for a while.
That right there is huge. That is we as a society, we've gotten so used to phones or through connecting through social media that those personal connections and that face-to-face is lost. I mean, that was one of the things that is the Civil Affairs Schoolhouse. That's one of the biggest problems that they faced over there, was the fact that they're like, we're seeing massive problems where people just don't know how to speak to people anymore. And one of the assignments that they would actually put out there is they're like, go out into town and talk to people, go to coffee shops, go. And, if you can't find anybody to talk to you, because sometimes it's weird like that. Some people, like, you go to talk to someone and they look at you like you got a third eye on your forehead or something. And, and it's just, you're just trying to be social. But one of the things was, all right, fine, go, don't buy it, but go and talk to a car salesman, talk to someone that they have to talk to you for an amount of time and see if you can gain some rapport there. And that was one of the things. It's a big thing. It's one of those soft skills that has been lost along the way, I think, as technology has grown, but it's extremely important, especially, within the workforce. And especially for veterans too, you've been around the military for X amount of time, and in some places, especially infantry, we're a little more abrasive, I would say, than others. So then you go to move into a professional setting, and it's just not the same. It's not the same language. It's not the same interaction. It can be to an extent once you open up those doors, or once those people, you open up to them and you have established a rapport. But yeah, that's a big thing right there. And every interaction is it's practice, yeah, that's a big one. Getting in those reps on practice for sure.
Yeah. Now I'll tie all that together. When I went to the reserves, I transitioned, I reclassed to civil affairs. That was my next MLS. And I think one of the best courses I ever took was the civil affairs reclassification course, because it does do that. It forces you to go out there and have those key leader engagements, those conversations that in the infantry, it's kind of expected with rank. As you move up, you're expected to just know how to do it. You're not really taught on how to do it. Maybe you get like the range handbook, and there's some steps, step-by-step sequence of this in there. But the same could be applied to your job seeking. You may find that first role outside the military, and as getting your foot in the door, which is great, but you have to continue upskilling and learning and growing and seeking professional development in order to grow within that space. Like for me, within Hire Heroes, I've gone from a transition specialist to now director of client programs. But along the way, a lot of upskilling and failures and some successes as well to grow and grow and grow. I think the moment I stop growing, I'll stop climbing, because that's really just human nature, I think. But
yeah,
again, it comes back to that one skill. If you don't have people skills, you're already a step behind the curve. But if you have people skills, you can do it. You can literally do anything.
Yeah. That right there, I mean, to put it in military terms, that's your force multiplier. That's that, what is it? The one thing, and that's the one to where if you can focus on that, everything else kind of falls in line. I mean, you're always working to improve your fighting position, if you will. But that one right there is going to be your moneymaker, your one in the bag. So, Johnathan, where can we find, I know you had mentioned it before, but where can we find Hire Heroes USA, and how can we get in touch with them to start the process?
Absolutely. HireHeroesUSA.org. You can go there and get registered. Also follow our events, our job board and things like that are all present there, on as well as volunteer opportunities if you want to get back that way as well. We're always looking to grow our volunteer base to have more, as I mentioned earlier, experts who can provide that more meaningful coaching and things like that when it's needed. Or on LinkedIn. We are also on LinkedIn. We share everything we do, especially through our specialized programming with women veterans, military spouses, and our generally listed young veteran population. So we're always posting. If you see a Hire Heroes employee on LinkedIn, connect with them. I promise you they'll be a good follow.
Awesome. Hey, Johnathan, man, it's been great talking. Hang tight. I want to talk to you afterwards here, but thank you so much for joining us on the show and spreading the word and knowledge here, man.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Veteran Success Story. To find more about Johnathan Severs and the organization Hire Heroes USA, you can go to hireheroesusa.org. I'm also going to be putting the links in the description point of this episode, so you can find everything there. And I'm going to try to put as much resources that I can in there to help you guys out, to be able to just one click over in order to get this help. So again, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Johnathan was just a wealth of information there. Really, I need to start working on, doing some more deep dives, getting some longer episodes in here with people and talking about different things that they did to help them. But, this was a great episode, and I loved talking with Mr. Severs about his own path there and kind of on how they're out there helping others and how they can be a force multiplier out there within the veteran space in helping people, not just get that initial job placement, but really be there for that next step along the way and put them in touch with other people. I know other people that have benefited from their program, and one of them, the episode's already recorded, but one of them should be airing down the road fairly shortly. I didn't want to pack too many things involving the same people all in one, but his story is really great and how they helped him. Again, yet another infantry guy, but they helped him in moving from a military career into the civilian side, and very successfully. So it's great on the different services that Hire Heroes USA provides, and I hope that someone out there who's listening can, go over to that side and find value in the services that they offer, or to tell a friend, hey, you know what, I'm set, but I looked into it and I think that this might be something that you could use. Point them the way of this. So, again, if you think it's this episode something that can be useful to somebody else out there, that's all I ask. Share it. I don't charge for this stuff. I'm not running a Patreon or actual paid subscriptions. Hopefully I don't ever have to do that, because I'm hoping to provide this content to be an outlet for this information for you guys, free of charge. It is time consuming, but it's rewarding, and it's my way of trying to give back into the veteran community. As I've found a lot of benefit for myself, here in this and talking with these people and building these episodes. So follow and subscribe for more. Have another great guest coming up next week. You guys are going to love it. So again, hireheroesusa.org, and check the description. And I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and until next week, this has been yet another veteran success story.